Imagine walking down the tunnel of a concrete stadium in East Berlin. It is March 1986. The air is thick with the smell of cheap tobacco and industrial smog. You are a referee, and your heart is hammering against your ribs. As you reach the referee's dressing room, the door is already open. Sitting inside, draped in a heavy, dark leather coat, is a man who doesn't belong in a sports arena. He doesn't look at you. He simply taps a pristine, official manila folder on the table. Inside that folder is your dossier, your travel records, the names of your children, the Western consumer goods your wife bought on the black market. The man looks up. His eyes are entirely devoid of warmth.
BFC Dynamo does not lose today.
He says softly.
Because if Dynamo loses, Germany loses. And you will find yourself officiating regional matches in the coal mines of Cottbus by Tuesday.
This wasn't just a threat. This was the weekly operational reality of East German football. To the casual observer outside the Berlin Wall, Berliner Fußballclub Dynamo was an absolute juggernaut. A golden generation that captured 10 consecutive Oberliga titles from 1979 to 1988. They played with a ruthless, machine-like precision, dynamic and unyielding. But this wasn't a fairy tale of sporting excellence. This was a nightmare of absolute state control. Because BFC Dynamo didn't belong to the people of Berlin. They belonged to the Ministry for State Security. They belonged to the Stasi. And their ultimate fan was the most feared man in East Germany. To understand how a football club became an instrument of psychological terror, you have to understand the German Democratic Republic, the GDR, in the cold heart of the Cold War. It was a surveillance state wrapped in iron, a society where 1 in every 60 citizens was an informant. And at the absolute apex of this panopticon sat Erich Mielke. Mielke was the head of the Stasi. He was a man obsessed with control, terrified of dissent, and unexpectedly, profoundly fanatical about football. To Mielke, sports were not a distraction, they were a battleground of political legitimacy. If the capitalist West had glamour, the communist East would have flawless, engineered dominance. In 1953, Mielke took control of the Sports Association of the Internal Security Forces, transforming it into BFC Dynamo. But there was a problem. The team was mediocre. They were constantly overshadowed by traditional powerhouses like Dynamo Dresden and Magdeburg. For Mielke, this mediocrity was a personal insult to the state. So he decided to change the rules of the game entirely. If a rival club possessed a generational talent, Mielke didn't offer a transfer fee. He issued a state decree. In 1954, the entire roster of Dynamo Dresden was suddenly, forcibly ordered to pack their bags overnight and move to Berlin. Their lives, their families, and their loyalties were reassigned to BFC Dynamo with the stroke of a bureaucratic pen. Footballing merit was entirely discarded. The league was re-engineered to serve the ego of a dictator. By the late 1970s, Mielke's manufactured empire was fully operational. But football is a chaotic game. Even the best players can have an off day. A ball can strike a post. A goalkeeper can slip on the turf. Moggi, in Italy, used subtle psychology and burner phones. Erich Mielke used the raw, terrifying gravity of the secret police. Every single referee in the East German Oberliga knew that their career and their personal freedom lay in the hands of the Stasi. Before crucial matches, referees were regularly visited by Stasi officers. The message was never delivered with a vulgar bribe. It was delivered with a quiet reminder of what compliance could buy. Compliance meant a stamp on your passport. It meant the golden ticket to referee an international match in the West, allowing you to cross the Berlin Wall and taste freedom, if only for 45 minutes. Non-compliance meant your telephone was tapped. It meant your apartment was searched while you were at training. It meant your children were suddenly denied entry into university. The results on the pitch became a dark comedy. Opposing defenders would stand perfectly still inside the penalty box, terrified to tackle a Dynamo forward because the slightest contact would result in a penalty. Linesmen would raise their flags to disallow perfectly legal goals scored against Berlin. The stadium crowds across East Germany began to boil with a helpless, furious rage. BFC Dynamo became der Schandelf, the Shame 11. They were widely recognized as the most hated football club in the entire history of the sport. Every time they lifted a trophy, the fans didn't cheer, they spat at the pitch. The systemic rot reached its absolute breaking point on March 22, 1986. BFC Dynamo was playing away against Lokomotiv Leipzig. The entire nation was watching. Leipzig was a proud, traditional club, and they were playing the match of their lives. Against all odds, despite the invisible pressure, Leipzig took a 1-1 draw into the final seconds of the match. The stadium was a cauldron of hope. The fans believed, just for a moment, that the system could be beaten by pure sporting defiance. Then came the 95th minute. A Dynamo forward chased a long ball into the Leipzig penalty area. The Leipzig defender made a flawless, textbook slide tackle, cleanly sweeping the ball away. The forward tripped over the ball, tumbling gently to the grass. The referee, a man named Bernd Stumpf, didn't hesitate. He pointed directly to the penalty spot. It was a ghost penalty. A decision so blindingly, outrageously corrupt that the entire stadium fell completely silent before erupting into a deafening roar of disgust. Dynamo converted the penalty. They won the match. They marched on to secure yet another stolen championship. But this time, the invisible line had been crossed. The blatant theft was broadcast on national television. The outrage was so severe, so dangerously close to causing civil unrest in the streets, that even the socialist ruling party realized Mielke had gone too far. In an unprecedented move to pacify the public, the East German Football Association officially banned the referee Bernd Stumpf for life. It was a sacrificial offering to hide the true puppeteer, but everyone knew the truth. The referee hadn't made a mistake. He had simply followed the script written in leather coats. In November 1989, the Berlin Wall didn't just crack, it collapsed entirely. And with it, the terrifying apparatus of the Stasi dissolved into the ashes of history. Without the shadow of Erich Mielke protecting them, BFC Dynamo's 10-year dynasty vanished overnight. The club was stripped of its invisible armor. Sponsors fled, rival teams reclaimed their autonomy, and the fans abandoned the stadium in droves. Today, the club exists in the lower, forgotten tiers of regional German football, playing in front of tiny crowds in a reunified Berlin. Their 10 consecutive titles remain in the record books, but they are viewed not with reverence, but with a profound historical melancholy. They are titles wrapped in wire, championships bought with fear. So, was BFC Dynamo's 10-year streak just state-sponsored theft? The answer echoes through the empty concrete terraces of their old stadium. They were a club that won everything, yet gained absolutely nothing. Because when a dictatorship manufactures your glory, your victories don't belong to the history of sport. They belong to the history of crime. And in the end, the beautiful game always outlasts the tyrants who try to cage it.